The seed stitch is our focus today. We're working on lesson 5 in how to knit for complete beginners. This is our seed stitch lesson. The interesting part about this pretty stitch using knits and purls is you can work with an odd number of stitches or an even number of stitches. You also can work it as a 1-row repeat or a 2-row repeat. Now we'll explore that more later on, but we do have a washcloth pattern for you today which focuses on an all over pattern and also one with a border, so you get the benefit of both. If you tuned into our garter stitch video, you can see that we did one with the border in just garter stitch, so we're going to have something similar working with the seed. You can see it has this pretty delicate border. It's very versatile. You can use this on blankets and the such, or just on this washcloth sample today. I'm going to show you how to do the basic stitch in a 1-row and a 2-row repeat, whether you're working with an even number of stitches or an odd number of stitches, and then we'll dive in and we'll make a washcloth for you from start to finish on both of these patterns. We'll see you soon. Welcome to Good Knit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. The seed stitch is great because it has this beautiful little pattern of not only knits and purls, it looks like it's sprinkled with little seeds everywhere, but you can work with an even number of stitches or an odd number of stitches and it looks the same way. It doesn't change. And it's also a little bit more delicate than, say, when you work with, say, a garter stitch like this one. You see these pronounced ridges. This one has a more delicate look and also has a nice texture to it, and it can be kind of unisex. It doesn't really matter masculine or feminine. It works for a variety of projects. So let's go over the universal thing that you need to keep in mind when you work with seed stitch, whether it's an even number of stitches or odd. You are always going to knit the purls and purl the knits. So once you get your stitch going, you just need to take a look at your knitting, see what your first stitch is going to be, and you're going to knit or purl the opposite of what you see. So I see a purl stitch at the beginning of this one, so I'm just going to knit it. So I'm going to start by knitting that stitch, and my next stitch I'm going to purl it because it was a knit stitch before. So you just repeat until the end. Now this is a 1-row repeat that I'm working on right now, so it's always going to be knit, purl, repeating that all the way until the end. But with an odd number of stitches, you guessed it, you're going to have an extra stitch at the end. So you just repeat with the very first stitch that you started with, which is really just whatever next stitch would be next in your little sequence, and then you stop. So I'm going to complete this row. And of course, if I'm going too fast, you can pause your video. But this is just more of a demonstration, and then we're going to do it slower here in a moment. See my extra yarn here. Okay, and then this last stitch, you can see it's a purl stitch, and I'm going to knit it. And that 1-row repeat stays because when I turn it over, you can see that that purl became, or that knit at the last stitch becomes a purl here, and then I can just keep repeating that one pattern all the way through, that 1-row repeat. Let's go over to my 2-row repeat, and it is an even number of stitches. Now it starts off the same way. You have knit and then purl, okay, and then you're going to repeat that. Knit, purl, knit, purl, and then we have 2 remaining stitches, and you're just knitting and purling. So basically you're just repeating it until the very end and no more stitches. The second row, you turn it over and you're on the wrong side. Now, if you continue an all over pattern, it won't really matter if you're on the wrong side or not, but you just need to remember on your second row repeat, you have to begin with a purl stitch because look, see, you have a knit stitch on the end now. So the second row always starts with a purl and then a knit, okay? And then it just repeats until the end. But if you're not counting your rows, which you don't have to in seed, and you just study what is the stitch that's coming, well, that's a V-shaped stitch, so that's a knit. So I want to do the opposite, and I want to put my yarn forward and do a purl. Then I know what the next stitch is all the time, and I really don't have to count on some stitch pattern to tell me what it is. I can just witness and see what's next and then just do that stitch. Okay, so this one I'm ending on a knit stitch because I began with a purl, and then when I flip to the other side it looks consistent and pretty. On both of these, I recommend when you finish in seed stitch that you bind off in pattern. That means that you would bind off with the next stitch that it would be. So this one I'm going to knit this, and this one I would purl, and then I would pass those two stitches over each other to do the bind off or cast off. Okay, all right, let's begin our pattern of washcloths. Let's go into pattern and supplies. Down in the link below, you can get the pattern, so be sure and download that or check it out on our blog. Again, there are 4 patterns in one on this one. It's 2 main patterns of either a seed stitch all over or a seed border, and then you can choose if you want the smaller yarn and needles or the larger yarn and needles. So let's look at our supplies. If you want to work with the smaller yarn and needles, I've got a medium 4 weight yarn here. This is a cotton. It's actually a mercerized cotton from Lion brand called 24/7 cotton. And this is a medium 4 weight yarn. And I'm working with a US 7 needle, which is a 4.5 millimeter needle. You can step down to a US 6 or go up to an 8. It just depends on how tight you want your stitches. And for the larger needles and yarn, I'm working with Yarnspirations Bernat Softy Chunky. This one is a 6 weight yarn, super bulky. It kind of is a little bit of light side of a 6, and you can work with a needle size all the way down to a US 11 needle, which is 8 millimeter. And I'm working with US 15, which is a 10 millimeter. The stitches are a bit looser, and the size I got was a 7" by 7". You could step down to a smaller needle and your face cloth or washcloth will just get a little bit smaller, but you may enjoy that more. So just work with the needle that you have and grab an appropriate weight yarn, and we will begin. Now let's grab our other supplies, which is a measuring tape. You're going to need that, and you might want a couple of stitch markers if you're working with the border design. Plus you'll want some scissors and a tapestry needle for weaving in your ends. All right, let's go over the pattern. Now I've already covered the basic supplies and information on the yarn and the needles. This week we're going to be working on abbreviations and jumping up your levels in pattern reading. And even though I've written out knits and purls before, I put them on the abbreviations, so you should have seen those before, and now they're actually going to be written out in our pattern. If you see REP, it just means repeat, and so you kind of just hit that in your head and read. When you see K, it means knit. When you see P, it means purl, and when you see REP, it means repeat. And then of course we've gone over right side and wrong side, and then what STS is, which is stitches or stitch. Okay, so it's an easy level pattern. We've already covered cast on many times before. We're just working with the long tail cast on. You know about the yarn and the needles changing and the sizing. If you change your size of your yarn and needles, it will change the size of your washcloth. We did talk about odd versus even stitch count, so you can refer to that back in the beginning of this video. And then I recommend the bind off and pattern, which I've actually kind of covered already. And we also did bind off and pattern in our previous lesson 4 when we worked on the rib stitch, so you should be familiar with that one. See that video if you need, and all video links are down below to slower tutorials. We have 2 patterns in here. The first one that appears is the seed border washcloth, and I'm going to go over that one in tutorial with you because it's a little bit more complicated. Not that it's complicated, but I'm going to be showing you slipping and putting on stitch markers. The gauge is something we haven't covered yet in tutorials, but it is just the measured width in an area for these stitches across. It's just how many stitches you count in a 4-inch measured area, and this says in stockinette stitch, so that's this middle part right here. So when you measure across 4 inches, you can count 9 stitches in that for option 1, which is the bulkier option, and in option 2 you get 20 stitches. And the rows part is the vertical part, up and down, so you count how many going up and down in a 4-inch area in the same thing. Measurements, that's just the overall size, and then we go into our instructions. So for option 1, we've got the super bulky, and it's a cast on of 16 stitches. Notice this is the even number, so it's that 2-row repeat. So when we come down, we see row 1, row 2. Row 1, RS is right side. Now we see our first abbreviations. K1 is knit 1, And then we have P1, which is purl 1. And then we repeat, that's the REP, from. Okay, so this is where some people get hung up. There's an asterisk there. When you see the asterisk or asterisk, that is something you're going to go back to and find the next one before it, or the one before it. So I see that and I go back here and I go, okay, I'm going to repeat from this asterisk to end of row. So I'm just going to keep repeating that over and over and over until I get to the end of my row. Okay, there's not any extra stitches on it. And then we turn it over onto the wrong side and we do the opposite. We're going to purl 1, knit 1, repeat back and forth those all the way until we get to the end of the row. And then we're going to repeat those rows 1 to 2 one more time. Okay, and that's for the bulky one. All right, let's jump over the next page. Row 3, we're going to, on the right side, knit 1, purl 1, repeat one more time, and then we're going to place a marker and we're going to knit until we have 4 stitches left, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to repeat knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. That's it. Now we could have written those out like that, but you'll see in a moment why we don't. And then row 4, we're going to work on the wrong side of that, and then we're going to do the opposite. And we repeat to the marker and we slip our marker and purl to the marker. And this is where we start working on the middle part, the what we call the field, or the middle here, this stockinette field. Okay, and so we're going to go through that and we just repeat that until we come to a measured length, and then we finish up our seed border at the end similar to the beginning, and then bind off. Now option 2, the medium weight cloth, you're casting on 32 stitches, and it's a similar beginning, but we're going to repeat rows 1 and 2 3 more times instead of once more. And then rows 3 and 4 are the same. They're written exactly the same, except for one thing. It just has another repeat on there. So it actually has knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So you have 6 before and after the stitch marker. So this one, it says place marker, knit until 6 stitches remain, place marker, and then you repeat that seed stitch to the end. Then on the wrong side, in the middle between, you're working on those purl stitches, so you get a stockinette field. And then you finish off similar to the beginning, bind off in pattern. Okay, so that's the overall of this pattern. Let's dive into that now, but I do want to jump over and show you a couple pages back. This is where the all over seed washcloth is. It's very similar, except you only have that one row repeat and you have a different cast on depending upon the size that you're doing. So if it's super bulky, cast on 15. If it's the medium weight, cast on 31 stitches. And that is it on that one. So you can see why I'm going to do the other pattern. All right, let's dive in. To cast on for your washcloth on the super bulky, you're going to cast on 16 stitches, and for the medium weight, cast on 32. Here's how we cast on. We're going to pull out about 3 times the width that we're going to make. So I'm going to pull out 1, 2, 3. I've got a little tail here, and I'm going to put my yarn on my needle. You can make a slip knot, or you can just place it directly on there. And I have my tail yarn in the front, and my ball yarn is at the back. Grab my yarn, split it at the needle, hold on to it with my finger, pull back in my slingshot. Okay, and we do have the slower tutorials, so don't forget about those. We're going to scoop up at the thumb, go down at the finger, and then go down at the thumb and let it go. All right, remember we want it loose enough so it can move, but not too loose it doesn't fall off there. Okay, let's do that again. Grab it and get it into place. Go up at the thumb, down at the finger, down at the thumb, and let it go. All right, continue casting on. 16 for the bulky and 32 for the medium weight. Pause your video and I will see you soon. All right, once you've cast it on, you're just going to start row 1 on the right side. You're going to knit 1 and yarn forward and purl 1. And repeat, knit 1, purl 1, and again, remember that you've got to put your yarn to the back when you're ready to make your knit stitch. Bring the yarn forward when you want to make the purl stitch. Otherwise, well, you'll get extra yarn. So you'll get this extra yarn on here and you'll make an extra stitch, and you don't want that. So you just continue repeating across. Again, you will not have any stitches remaining at the end of this because this is a 2-row repeat. If you are working with the all over seed pattern, then you'll repeat the very first stitch at the end. You'll have an even number to repeat across, and then you have that odd one left. Okay, so continue repeating. Pause your video, and I will meet you back up for the next row. See you soon. We've completed row 1. If you're working on the all over seed pattern, then you can just keep repeating until it reaches 7 inches, and then you'll be ready to bind off. So you can go click in the timestamps down below or in the chapter button to jump to that portion of the video. That's totally fine. I'm going to move on with row 2 for the people who are working on the seed border. So row 2, again, we're going to knit the purls and purl the knits. So we have a very first stitch here with a knit stitch, so we're going to purl it, and our written pattern says purl 1, knit 1. So same thing. So we're just going to purl the first stitch and knit the next stitch and repeat. Purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, and continue. So continue repeating that row all the way across. Pause your video and I'll meet you for the next step. See you soon. You've now completed your second row, and we're ready to repeat rows 1 and 2. So your knitting should have 2 rows like this one. If you're working on the super bulky, you're just going to repeat that once more. So you're going to repeat row 1 once more and row 2 once more, and you'll be ready, and your border will look like this right here, and you'll be ready to move on to this portion. And if you are working on the medium weight washcloth, you're just going to repeat that 2-row repeat 3 more times so that you actually have 8 rows here. So if you want to learn how to count them, just come right down here and you can see the purl bumps are really easy to spot. So if you look at the lowest purl bump you see, which is actually this one right here, not the cast on little bumps, but right here, this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. You can also count them in odd numbers like this. You can say, okay, this is 1, 3, 5, 7, and then you can see the 8th stitch is that V shape right up there. So if you want to count it that way, or count them up from row 2, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so now you know how to count them. So continue repeating until you're at this point, and then you're going to want to grab your stitch markers for the next step. We'll see you soon. You should have completed your first part of your border. Okay, so we have that done, and we're ready for stitch markers. Now, I didn't show putting on the locking stitch marker, but if you can see where my tail is for my long tail cast on, you can see I am back on the right side, or the correct side, and my tail is over here. And I went ahead and put that stitch marker on there so you can see a visual on my video. And over here, I've placed it on this smaller one as well. Okay, so we're ready to continue on. These will be slightly different from each other, so I'm going to give you the repeats back to the pattern, but you can refer to that as well. So we're going to start row 3 with knitting 1 and purling 1, and both of these are the same, so go ahead and do that. So knit 1, purl 1, and then you're going to repeat one more time on the bulky one. So knit 1, purl 1, and then we're going to place our marker, okay, and then we're going to put our yarn to the back, and we're going to knit until we have 4 stitches left. Okay. Again, pause as needed. You can slow down or speed up the video if you need. There should be playback controls. Okay, we have 4 stitches left. Remember, if you need to undo a stitch, you just put your needle in there. I like to pull that yarn back, and then you can undo a stitch like that. Okay. All right, so once you've knitted till you have 4 stitches left, put the stitch marker on, and continue repeating your knit 1, purl 1. And so this is now set up with our stitch markers to help us. It's especially helpful when we're on the wrong side, and it just helps us work until the very last few stitches and not go over too far. Okay, well, actually it helps us on the wrong and the right side. Okay, so if you're working the smaller needles, row 3 is knit 1, purl 1, and then you're going to repeat that 2 more times. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and then we're going to place our marker. Just put it right on that needle, put your yarn to the back, and knit until you have 6 stitches left. You don't really have to look at the pattern at this point because you know that you have 6 on this side, so you're going to have 6 on this other side. So it's just the same as that last one, and when you get there, go ahead and place that marker and then work that knit 1, purl 1 all the way until the end. Okay, so complete those rows. Go ahead and pause your video and I'll meet you back for row 4. See you soon. All right, you're ready for row 4, and on the wrong side, we're going to start with purl 1, knit 1, and then both of these patterns are going to be the same, meaning both sizes are going to have the same on repeats. So you're going to knit 1, purl 1, purl 1, knit 1, and then purl 1, knit 1. Basically the same repeats until you get to the stitch marker. And then you're going to slip that stitch marker over. And then continue by purling until you get to the next stitch marker. So you can see I've already flipped my samples over. This is the right side, here's the wrong side, and you can see we have a field of stockinette here in reverse stockinette, which is all purl. So you're going to be purling up until that stitch marker and then working that same pattern again. So yarn forward and go ahead and purl all the way to the stitch marker. And then once you get to that stitch marker, it's the same as before. So I worked out all the numbers. So this part is just like that next part. Okay, I didn't mirror or reverse it or anything. All right, all the way down. And slip that stitch marker. Go ahead and put the yarn to the back. And actually, nope, sorry, yarn forward. I messed up there. So keep it there. That very first stitch is a purl, just on the wrong side. And then we put the yarn to the back, knit, yarn front, purl, and yarn back, and knit the last stitch. Okay? And then you are ready for the next row. All right, so go ahead and work that on that other one if you need. Again, you just work purl, knit all the way to the stitch marker, purl between stitch markers, purl, knit, work that till the end, and you'll be ready for row 5. Pause your video and I will see you at row 5. So you completed a row 5. It looks like this. You're on the right side, and row 5 really looks like row 3. It's just that you're not placing the stitch markers anymore. So on either one of these, you're going to knit purl until the stitch marker, then you're going to knit across until the stitch marker, then you're going to knit purl until the end. They're the exact same. So the row that we just did, row 4, and then this one, row 5, you're going to repeat those until you have reached the desired length. And so that is 5.5 inches. Okay, so we're going to go until 5.5 inches measured from the end here all the way up until this very bottom stitch down here. Okay, so when the 5.5 hits this part right here, that's about right. And then you will end on a wrong side row after you complete one row that has all the purls on it, and you'll be ready to start the ending border. Okay. All right. So go ahead and work on that. Pause your video and I will meet you at that point. We'll see you soon. All right, we've completed to our desired length. I went ahead and pulled out my knitting to make sure I've relieved a little bit of that extra tension in there. And we've measured. I'm going to put my 0 up here. The 5.5 is down here. I've got my 5.5 inches. If I turn that over, that's 14 centimeters. You can measure it from this direction if you want as well. And once you've measured that, got it to the length that you need, you can go ahead and start on rows 6 and 7, which are just like rows 1 and 2. So you start on the right side, knit 1, purl 1 till you get to that stitch marker. Go ahead and take it off, and then continue repeating until the end. And then you turn it over and make a wrong side row, which is purl 1, knit 1 all the way across. And then on the bulky weight one, you're just going to repeat that once more. So it's going to finish out like this with 4 rows of those purl stitches or the seed stitch. And on the medium weight, you're going to have rows 6 and 7 repeated 3 more times. So you have those 8 rows there. And then we're going to bind off in pattern. So go ahead and knit to that length, working seed stitch, and we'll bind off in pattern and weave in the tails together. Pause your video and I'll see you at that point. You're at the end and you should have all your live stitches on your needles. I've got my smaller sample here just to show you binding off in pattern, and then I'm going to show you weaving in your tails. Okay, so you want to start off by knitting that purl stitch and then purl that knit stitch. And then you're going to lift the first loop over the second. I go ahead and put the yarn to the back and do it that way. So pass that over and you bound off 1 stitch. And then now the next stitch is a knit stitch and you've already got the yarn set up in the back. So knit that one and then pass that over to bind off. That's 2 bound off. Put the yarn forward because you need to purl the next stitch because you see a knit stitch. So it's important that you just keep binding off like that. Now when I purl my stitch, I go ahead and put the yarn back immediately because I like to lift my stitch over without that extra yarn in front. But you can do different if you want to. Oops, keep it in the back and we knit the next stitch. So you just continue binding off in pattern until you get to the last stitch, and then you're going to cut your yarn and pull through just as we've done before. Again, we have the tutorials on those that are slower from the beginning videos. And I got my last stitch, and that's going to be purl that stitch, and then knit over. And then you can just pull that through, clip your yarn, and pull through your tail, and then even out those stitches. And then I've already got this one ready, and so you're just going to get your tapestry needle and weave in the tails. And I do have a video on how to weave in on seed stitch, so that better video is down at the links below. But if you grab your tail here, and I like to go to the back, and especially on this bulkier one, it can tend to have too much bulk when you weave this in. So you can also split this yarn in half and weave half of the tail one direction and half of the tail in another direction, which minimizes that extra bulk that can be found. But all you're going to do is find your way up these stitches here, go up into the back, and follow the stitch pattern. So I'm going to go up underneath here, and I'm going to follow this yarn around and underneath this little loop here, and then around and through this purl stitch, and then I can continue following these loops all the way around. So I'm just matching my stitch pattern that I find. If I see a V-shaped stitch, I'm going to go around it and underneath. the stitches, and if I find a purl, I can go underneath it or through. So there is a better video. Like I said, it's a little bit dark here and it's a little bit hard to see, which I'm realizing as I'm doing this. But if you'll go down to that video down below, it's got a lighter yarn and a much better video on that. But essentially, you're just following your stitch patterns and weaving around in that duplicate stitch type of pattern that we talked about when we were weaving in our tails on the garter stitch and stockinette. All right, well, that is it. And you have now made your washcloths. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial today and made a few of washcloths, whether you did the border or all over, or you did all of them. Please tag me on Instagram. I'd love to see yours at GoodKnitKisses. And be sure and comment down in the links below and let me know what you make with yours. I can't wait to show you our next one. Our next tutorial is going to be on the moss stitch, and we're going to kick it up a notch with a beautiful design on that one as well. We'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.